What? What? Oh, it's you all. Well, you didn't have to use a max revive on me. Well, I guess if you're that persistent. Welcome back, everybody. So, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Hi, hello, and welcome to another fantastic adventure from the world of Pokemon. There are those who call me Bardbreaker, and it's time for another Pokemon Challenge video. So, I know it's been quite some time since we've done one of these, but just in time for Halloween, I figured, you know what, let's try and put one of these together. So today we're going to ask and answer the question that it didn't look like anybody else had done before. Can I beat Pokemon SOULSILVER using only a Gastly? So it's Halloween and ghosts are in the air, and also in my tier list video that I put out a couple years ago that nobody seems to have watched, and I decided what better way to get into the seasonal spirit than with a ghost run from my favorite gen. It's a dual ghost poison, for some reason, type from way back in Gen 1. It brings a base stat total of just 310 to the party, which puts it on par with a lot of starter Pokemon like Sprigatito, Torchic, and Grookey. We're pretty weak in most of our stats. We have a pretty decent showing for speed and special attack though. And the fact that we have a halfway decent speed stat should help us get our attacks in first, which will be critical considering we don't have a lot of defensive stats to back it up. Looking at the moveset, we can see that it's somewhat limited, especially for the early game. We start with Hypnosis, which is only 60% accurate in this gen, and Lick, a pretty weak ghost-type move. We do eventually learn some solid moves like Shadow Ball and Dream Eater, but that's not going to be for a while. Our TM list has few solid moves, and really not a lot of type coverage either. What there isn't easily accessible. We're going to have our hands full with this one. So with all that being said, let's go over the basic rules of the challenge. In Pokemon battles, I will only be using Gastly. I will need other Pokemon for HMs to progress the story, but they'll be otherwise left outside of the battle for the duration of the run. I won't be using any items in battle either. Held items and items outside of battles will of course be allowed. And lastly, I won't be using any cheats, glitches, or exploits, and will be playing the game by its intended rules aside from replacing one of the starters with Gastly so that we can do the run with it. With all that boilerplate stuff out of the way, let's start the show. So we start the run off pretty much like any other. We wake up, get ambushed by our mother, and then set off to the local old dude's house to get a Pokemon. I've used the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to replace Cyndaquil with Gastly so that we can do the entire run with it. Once we get our Gastly, I once again realized that I didn't have a nickname planned in advance, so after thinking about it for a tick, I settle on Liquidy. Because, well, let's face it, I burnt all my clever points on my HM names. And almost immediately, I'm confronted by something I hadn't really considered. Since all we have is Lick, we won't be able to hit any of these normal Pokemon that the game always throws at you early. This is going to make grinding a bit of a problem. I was so focused on what the gym leaders would have, I didn't stop to think about the early game. In any event, we flee from everything, and quickly make our way through Cherry Grove City to Mr. Pokemon's house, where we find him and Professor Tree 1.0 doing something totally family-friendly that definitely won't upset the algorithms if I mention it. Much like his companion, Mr. Pokemon sends us on Package Delivery Simulator, and we have to get something back to our own Professor Tree 2.0 with the utmost urgency. Oh, and while we're here, I finally remembered to check our nature. It's bold. And looking that up, it shows we have less attack and more defense. Neither of those stat changes are particularly helpful. Having less attack isn't really useful, because all of our attacks that we're going to be using are special for the most part, and having more defense really isn't that good either because, well, our defense is pretty low to begin with. And along the way back, we bump into someone who I am absolutely sure we'll never ever see again in this episode, and he challenges us to our first truly unavoidable battle of the run. Fortunately for us, because we're part ghost type, the game's AI knows it shouldn't bother using Scratch against us, so it just keeps using Leer over and over. This allows us to lick his little Totodile over and over until it keels over from exhaustion and we win. Once we get back to New Barktown, Palette in disguise, we inform the local constabulary that the boy we fought in town earlier was our sure-to-be arch-nemesis named Tim. After turning over the egg to Professor Tree, who seems amazed that these animals he studied for all of his life do in fact breed, he sends us on our merry way and the adventure truly begins. But before we even get back to Cherry Grove City, we stop and recruit the first of our HM deities along the way. We recruit a Geodude to the team, nicknaming him Bicepticus the 59th, long may he lift, and then head along right into town. Now, once we make our way north of Cherry Grove City, we find our first true obstacle of the run. These first couple of trainers have normal Pokemon that we literally can't hit with any of our ghost moves. So, the only option we really have here to clear them is to use Struggle. Struggle is a typeless move programmed into the game that still allows your Pokemon to attack even if you've exhausted all of your power points in battle. Most trainers won't ever encounter this move except perhaps by accident, but here we have to seek it out in order to be able to progress. Unfortunately, even Struggle doesn't get us past this trainer who has 2 normal Pokemon. Struggle inflicts recoil damage, so we're going to have to level up. And if I go to the Pokemon Center, that'll recharge our power points, so this is kind of a rather annoying Stonewall to run into early in the game. But, speaking of Stonewall, that gives me an idea. There are those Geodude north of the first route that you can access. In fact, where we just got Bisepticus from. And those would be susceptible to Lick, so that's our only real option here, to lick rocks. So, like Sisyphus at the gay bar, I set out in search of Geodudes. It takes us a while, but we finally lick enough dudes to get us to level 14. Getting us to level 14 gets us just what we need to finally beat the first mandatory boy with normal Pokemon standing in our way. It's a move called Curse, and an odd number of HP. Curse, at least with Ghost Pokemon, will reduce your opponent's HP by 1/4 each turn at the cost of 1/2 of your own. The reason we want an odd number of HP is because we will always leave us with just 1 HP if we use Curse. This lets us get off 2 curses, which is exactly what we need to beat the Rattata and the Hoot Hoot blocking our way. Yeah, maybe I didn't think this run through if I'm already having to strategize in order to beat the first trainer in the game. The rest of the way into Violet City is actually uneventful, which is somewhat remarkable considering we only had 1 HP the entire way. One nice thing about being dual-typed, again for some reason, is that our secondary poison type will keep us immune to being poisoned throughout the run. Speaking of poison dual typing, once we get into Violet City, it's time to make a run through Sprout Tower. Once we leave the Sprout Tower, it's time to attempt Falkner and the Flying Gym. Attempt being the operative word, as all these early birds are dual typed with normal. Now, if you ask me, and indeed you haven't, I don't feel like anything should be dual typed with normal, because then, by the very nature of, well, nature, it's not normal. Rattata, fine, it's a mouse, it's normal. But Pidgey, it's flying, therefore it's not normal. It shouldn't be normal, it should be flying. In fact, old data from Gen 1 games reveals that they were thinking of using a bird typing at one point. In any case, this means that none of his Pokemon here are Pokemon I can damage in the normal way. We could go in with Struggle, but I opt to try and use Curse to get us through the trainers ahead of Falkner. Once we get to him though, we have a problem. His first Pidgey actually can't damage us, but it can chunk our accuracy with Sand Attack. His second Pokemon is the bigger problem since it knows Gust, a flying move that can hurt us. And since we'll have half of our HP because we have to curse the Pidgey first, we have to be able to put the Pidgeotto to sleep with Hypnosis. A large ask with its already 40% chance to miss, on top of extra Sand Attacks. Ultimately, despite numerous tries at our higher level, we just can't get lucky enough to sleep the Pidgeotto long enough to get Curse to do its work. We really can't do anything at this level, so it's back to the grind. So after grinding a bit for some Alpha Bits, part of a complete breakfast, we stop and pick up a Bellsprout for Flash later. Yeah, I don't know how it learns that either, but it does. We nickname her Flashelius the 59th, long may she shine, and get back to the grind. I try Falkner again at level 20 after learning Confuse Ray, but the end results are still the same. We just get hit with multiple Pidgey Gribble Pocket Sands and blown away with Gust when we get to the Pidgeotto. At level 22, we learn Sucker Punch. It's a Dark-type move. Now it's physical, but it can at least hit Normal type. Unfortunately, I kinda goof here and I delete Curse to learn it. And since I saved, there was no undoing that without cheating. Sucker Punch would definitely work on the Pidgeotto, but because the Pidgey doesn't hit us with a damage-dealing move, our Sucker Punch is always going to fail. And since I got rid of Curse, we're stuck again. Well, time to level up even more. Finally, at level 20 freaking 6, we learn Payback. It's another Dark-type move. It's also physical, but this one doesn't require that they select a damage-dealing move to use, so this finally gives us the out we need to beat Falkner. I don't know that I've ever had to be this high of a level to beat the first gym leader in any of my previous runs before. Maybe the Sunkern run? I don't know, I didn't check. But man, maybe there's a reason I couldn't find that anyone else had done this before. From there, we proceed to Azalea Town. Both the routes there, as well as the Slowpoke Well, don't pose a challenge at all. We are ungodly overleveled for this point in the game, so we have absolutely no trouble getting to town, rescuing the old acorn man from the well, or running Team Rocket out of town to boot. In stark contrast to Falkner at the first gym, Bugsy at the second gym is a horse of a different color and is so much easier. His Scyther comes out first and takes a couple of licks, drinks a potion or two, but really just wastes its focus energy. We wind up leveling up when we knock it out and learn one of the best moves we can learn, the 80 base power special move Shadow Ball. Needless to say, his Metapod and Kakuna don't stand a ghost of a chance. Okay, I think that's the only time I use that in this script. and we easily triumph for the second badge. On the way out of town, we're accosted by our rival Tim for a second time. Much like Bugsy though, his 3 Pokemon can't stand up to our Stab Shadow Ball or our over-leveled Ghost, and we just one-shot our way through his entire team without a scratch. I'm sure it won't last, but it is nice to be making up some time after that stall fest early. Once we save the wayward Farfetch'd, we have to pick up a couple more members of our HM squad. I first stop and grab a Spearow for Fly later, nicknaming her Flapsity the 59th, long may she fly, and a Rattata for Cut, which we'll need right away, nicknaming him Snipticus the 59th, long may he cut, and then set about moving through the forest. Speaking of moving forward, our next destination is the normal gym and its leader Whitney. And whoo boy, let me tell you what, this was not a pleasant first attempt. We've got over 10 levels on her Pokemon, but they are physical tanks, and our Payback isn't doing anything against the Clefairy. Fortunately, its metronome rolls aren't doing much to us either. We just have to keep it confused while pecking away at it with Payback before finally facing down the cow. And this just isn't going anywhere. Her Miltank is famously difficult, and it's no exception here. We can't hit it with Shadow Ball, so our only choice are to confuse it or sleep it and whittle it down with Payback. Unfortunately, it has a Lumberry to heal the first status condition we inflict on it. Its ability allows it to hit us with normal type moves, which she gets a stab bonus for, like her Stomp, and her move Attract immobilizes us 50% of the time. And to top all of that off, she has Milk Drink, so even if we do whittle her down, she can just heal herself over and over again. We just do not have what we need to take down her Miltank at this point. Even if we land a critical hit from Payback, it's not going to do enough. We just need to level. I go around the area battling everyone I can find and come back to Whitney 3 levels higher at 33. At this point, I've removed Payback and replaced it with Dream Eater. It's a 100 base power psychic move that will also heal us for 50% of the damage it inflicts. The only stipulation is that the opponent must be asleep for it to hit. But this is why I've kept Hypnosis the entire time. We start out with the Clefairy, and though we miss our first Hypnosis, it just uses Mimic to steal our Hypnosis before we put it to sleep and bring it down with a single Dream Eater. Strawberry Short Cow is back up, and we confuse it to bait out the Lumberry and then take a Stomp. Our next move is Hypnosis, which finds its mark and puts her to sleep. We nearly one-shot her with Dream Eater, which was way more damage than I was expecting it to do, before she uses a Super Potion, which doesn't help her really, as we Dream Eater again the next turn to bring it down for a quick victory. Now what a difference a better move can make. The route to Ecruteak City is uneventful, as is our battle with Tim in the Burn Tower. We're able to one-shot Shadow Ball through his entire team, including the Magnemite that resists Ghosts. I'm not really sure why Steel resists Ghosts, but it is what it is. Also, speaking of type matchups that don't make much sense, it's perhaps not shocking at all that we're able to breeze through the Ghost Gym without a scratch. Ghost is weak to Ghost, and also Dark, for reasons. And so not only can we hit it for double damage with Shadow Ball, but we've also learned Dark Pulse, which doesn't give us a stab bonus, but it still hits for double against Ghosts. So we just breeze right through Morty without a second thought. After Morty though, we stop and pick up a Poliwag since it's getting time to surf, nickname him Aquades the 59th, long may he swim, and make our way over to Mahogany Town. Once there, we defeat the Red Gyarados before agreeing to help Lance dispatch the local Team Rocket coven. He literally just hyper beams a dude, but I guess we're cool with it. Defeating Team Rocket is a breeze as always, and we quickly find our way to Price at the Ice Gym. We dispatch his initial offering, a Seal with a Shadow Ball. His Dugong comes out next and crits us with an Aurora Beam after withstanding one of our Shadow Balls. We finish it off though and move on to the Piloswine that lands a Blizzard and knocks us out. Unfortunately, our second attempt doesn't go much better. The Seal isn't a one-shot this time, but it does miss an Icy Wind, so it's not a problem. The Dugong still survives our Shadow Ball, and this time doesn't crit us with an Aurora Beam, which is good, and we send it down. We get to the Piloswine again with more health this time, but it still lands at 70% accurate Blizzard. Not only that, but we get Frozen, a 10% chance, and we unfortunately can't thaw in time to land another hit. And sure enough, on the third attempt after making quick work of the Seal and Dugong, we once again get to the Piloswine. This time it misses its Blizzard, which allows us to get our 2 Shadow Balls in for the knockout blow. From there, it's a bit of a trek down to Olivine City. Jasmine vigilantly guards an Ampharos in the lighthouse and sends us on a mission to the pharmacy for her. Don't they have Pidgeot Prime in this universe to just have medicine airdrop to them with free 2-day shipping? In any case, we make our way down to Cianwood City and pay a visit to Cianwood Seamus's super secret potion shack to get the meds Jasmine so desires. We don't leave just yet though. I decide to stop off at the fighting gym here in the island to take out Chuck. He's only got 2 Pokemon, somewhat surprising for this late in the game. His Primeape isn't a problem and we dispatch it with a single Shadow Ball. His Poliwrath takes a Shadow Ball, though, and puts us to sleep with a taste of our own hypnosis medicine. It then spends a couple of our sleeping turns surfing, but we weather the storm and wake up in time to use another Shadow Ball for the win. We take the secret meds back to Jasmine, who turns the Ampharos back on and gets the lighthouse going once again, preventing a host of maritime disasters in Olivine City for days to come. Once she skitters off back to the gym, we follow her there for a match. Steel resists Ghost, so her first Magnemite hangs on by a sliver from our Shadow Ball to paralyze us with Thunder Wave. This also chunks our speed, so she's able to get a Thunderbolt in for about half damage. We bring it down though with a combo of Shadow Ball and Dark Pulse. Her second Magnemite comes in and brings us to red with a Thunderbolt of its own, but we got a lucky crit with Shadow Ball to bring it down in one shot. Now it's not looking good though, as we have only 25 HP left to deal with the beefy Steelix. It misses an Iron Tail though, and fortunately our Hypnosis lands to put it out. We're paralyzed though and miss a turn. Steelix stays asleep and we get off a Dream Eater to get about double our HP back. It stays asleep again and we get off a Shadow Ball to bring it red. We're back in the green now thanks to our Shell Bell as the Steelix wakes up and lands an Iron Tail. Thank God we had the Shell Bell though, as we just hang on with only 6 HP, and thank God the paralysis didn't stick as we got off another Shadow Ball for a very close victory on the first attempt. Before we can do anything else in the run though, it's time to go take out another coven of Team Rocket, this time hiding in the Goldenrod radio tower. Before the real Team Shady can stand up, we have to have another bout with Tim. Golbat's up first, but goes down to Shadow Ball. Sneasel, being dark, resists everything we can throw at it and gets off a Feint Attack and an Icy Wind, but goes down to 2 Shadow Balls. Haunter comes out next, but goes down to a Shadow Ball. Feraligatr loses to Shadow Ball, and his final Pokemon Magnemite goes down just the same. This is almost like Rollout, where I just use a round-themed move for the entire run, but you know what, hey, I'll take what I can get. I'm gay, I like balls, what can I say?
There you go, add that.
It's in there! We'll see, well, it's in there now. That wasn't in the script, but it's in there now. Once we make our way back to the Rocket Coven, we have a couple more executives to deal with. Ariana doesn't stand in our way, well, I mean, she literally does, but she doesn't pose a challenge, but Captain Archer, on the other hand, does. Dark Pokemon are immune to Psychic, and though I can still use Hypnosis on them in this gen, I can't use Dream Eater. They'll also resist Dark and Ghost, so we don't really have a good out here. Houndour survives on a Sliver and chunks our HP with either a Bite or a Feint Attack. Its bigger brother Houndoom, on the other hand, just flat out can't be beat at this point. We do way too little to it, it does way too much to us, so we're just at a major disadvantage here. I could possibly do it if I had some better luck on Hypnosis, but there's gotta be a better way. My fiance and I, for those of you that have been around for a while, still no date yet, but we're working on it, decided to look into things, and we realized that we can go get the TM for Sludge Bomb back in Mahogany Town. I thought this was only available in Kanto, but I must have been getting confused when researching this run. Needless to say, this move gets us past Captain Archer much easier. Sludge Bomb is just as strong as Dark Pulse, but we get a same type attack bonus thanks to being part poison. And now that Dark doesn't resist that, we can easily one-shot our way through his team and run the Rockets out of town for good. From there, we fly back to Mahogany Town and press on east through the ice path to get to Blackthorn City. We arrive at Clair at the Dragon Gym at level 55, and that proves to be sufficient. Gyarados' Intimidate isn't a problem, but the fact that it chunks our HP a lot with Bite is. But a couple of Shadow Balls bring it down. Next out is a Dragonair, but it goes down in a single shot with Shadow Ball. Another Dragonair is out next, and this one survives on a Sliver, lands a Thunder Wave to paralyze us, but another Shadow Ball takes it down. Finally out is a Kingdra, which hits our accuracy with a Smoke Screen before taking a Shadow Ball to the face. It responds by missing its Hydro Pump that likely would have won at the match before going down to another Shadow Ball for the victory. Of course, like a certain someone in real life, she refuses to concede. Instead, she makes us go prove our worth to some random old men in a cave before she begrudgingly agrees to give us our final badge for the run. The adventure, of course, is not over yet though. We still have to defeat all 5 Kimono girls in order without any chance to heal. And this actually takes a few attempts. I do make it to the final Vaporeon a couple of times, but honestly there are plenty of times we just flat out lose right away to the Umbreon. The Flareon in the middle also packs a wallop, and it can sometimes take us down too. Finally, we get a run where the Flareon actually helps us. It lands a Burn, which while yes, will do a little HP damage each turn, it chunks our attack too, but we aren't using that. More importantly though, it's a status condition, which means because we're burned, the Jolteon can't paralyze us with Thunder Wave. This finally lets us get to the Vaporeon more or less unrestricted, and allows us to finally get off a couple of hits against it to secure the win. Honestly, this series of girls are more difficult than some of the gyms in this run. They should just run a gym together instead of a kabuki theater. We make our way south to the Whirl Islands, where we wake up the main character of the movie Pokemon 2000. Because Lugia is part psychic type, and not water flying, which I always think it is for some reason, we do significant damage to the box legendary with Shadow Ball. It responds in kind with its signature move Aeroblast, but we come back with another Shadow Ball to knock it out for the win. At this point, the story is basically over, and it's time to make our way to the Indigo Plateau and the Elite Four. But, of course, it can't be that easy, as our rival Tim stops us at the door for one last challenge. Sneasel's out first, but goes down quick to a Sludge Bomb. Kadabra's out after that, and goes down to a single Shadow Ball. Haunter's out next, and suffers the same fate, going down easy. Feraligatr comes out, survives a Shadow Ball, lands a Crunch, and then goes down to another. Golbat is next, and also goes down to a Shadow Ball. Last out is his Magneton, which survives a Shadow Ball, hits us with Thunder Wave and a Shockwave before going down to another Shadow Ball. Finally, it's time for the Elite Four. Will is up first, and he's bringing Psychic Pokemon to the party, and there's not really much to be said here. He stacked his team with all Psychic Pokemon, and so they're all weak to, say it with me, Shadow Ball. It's a straight one-shot sweep across the board, and we don't even break a sweat. If only they were all so easy. Next up is Koga, formerly of the Fuchsia Gym and now a leader in the Elite Four. He still favors his poison types though, but our own poison typing will preclude him from using toxic or otherwise poisoning us. Ariados is up first and goes down quick to a Shadow Ball. We get a little cutesy with the Venomoth though and try to use Hypnosis, which misses before we get confused and then psychicked into the ground. I was trying to save some power points on my Shadow Ball and the luck just wasn't on our side. On the second pass through, I go ahead and just forego the Hypnosis and use Shadow Ball. Venomoth weathers it, but it misses a Supersonic. Koga full restores, allowing us the Shadow Ball to bring it to a Sliver and a Sludge Bomb to finish it off. Muck is out next, and our Hypnosis lands, it stays asleep, and we're able to one-shot it with a super effective Dream Eater. Crobat is out next and uses Double Team, and we miss our Shadow Ball. It strikes back with Wing Attack, and we bring it low with a Shadow Ball before it heals with a Berry. Another Wing Attack brings us to red before we dispatch it with Shadow Ball. Last out is Forretress, a Steel Bug type, and honestly, this is just a battle of attrition here. Because it's Steel, it's outright immune to Sludge Bomb and resists Shadow Eater and Dream Ball. That being said, it also can't hurt us. Its moveset is Toxic Spikes, which won't affect us, as well as Swift and Explosion, normal moves, which also can't affect us. So the only thing it can really do is use its fourth move, Protect, over and over again. Now the AI knows that's all it can do and tries to stall us, so all we can do is just keep whittling it down. For some reason, the AI even bothers to use a full restore when it knows it's hopeless, but we just keep chipping away until we finally beat over him and move on. Next up is Bruno, another Gen 1 holdover who still specializes in his fighting types. His Hitmontop is out first and weathers a Shadow Ball before using Dig. Unfortunately for him, our Levitate ability finally comes in handy for the first time all run, and we're immune to the ground move. Bruno heals it, and we hit it with a Sludge Bomb, which poisons it and finishes it off. Hitmonlee, the Kicking Fiend, is up next, and we hit it hard with a Sludge Bomb. It confuses us with Swagger, chunks us even more with Blaze Kick, before we're finally able to get off a Sludge Bomb to bring it down. Hitmonchan is out next. We snap out of confusion, bring it to red with a Sludge Bomb before it brings us to red with a Thunder Punch. We Sludge Bomb it again to bring it down, but now we're in the red with 2 more Pokemon to go. Onix is next, but it's pretty wimpy for its size and goes down to a single Shadow Ball. Last out is his Machamp, who weathers a Sludge Bomb, heals with a Citrus Berry, but is now poisoned. It hits back with a Rock Slide, which brings us to 1 HP. It's a razor-thin margin, but I go for Shadow Ball, and we secure the knockout and the victory. We couldn't have cut that any closer. We heal up, Elixir up, and move on to the final member of the Elite Four, Karen. Karen is the Dark-type master of the Elite Four, and true to her namesake, she likes to cause problems. Umbreon is out first, and we put it to sleep with Hypnosis, but we get a lucky crit to Sludge Bomb it and down in 1 hit. Murkrow is next, and doesn't even get off a shot as we bring it down with another Sludge Bomb. Houndoom is next. Surviving a Sludge Bomb, it nearly one-shots us with Crunch before we can bring it down with a second Sludge Bomb. We're in the red though, so not looking great, and out comes Gengar. And even though it's 2 times our own evolution, we still pack enough of a punch with our own Shadow Ball to bring it down in 1. Our Shell Bell gets us back to yellow health, and out comes a Vileplume. I land a Shadow Ball to bring it low and lower its special defense while it misses with Stun Spore. She then gives us the opening we need as she goes for a full restore, which allows us to get a single Shadow Ball in to finish off her last Pokemon and secure the win. Last up is Lance, who's been named champion in the time between Gens 1 and 2. He's still favoring Dragon types, or at least halfway. We get past the Gyarados with about half our health left before being decimated by his Aerodactyl, which outspeeds us and does massive damage with Crunch. I try again, putting the Gyarados to sleep first to get to the Aerodactyl with full health. We are nearly defeated with a crunch, but we can also do significant damage with our own Shadow Ball. I put it to sleep and sap its health with Dream Eater and move past to the Charizard. Now I am doing over half with Shadow Ball, but the Charizard responds with its own Shadow, this one a Claw instead of a Ball, to knock us out. I ultimately retry this battle a number of times, but it's always pretty much the same ending. We have to pretty much get past the Gyarados with full health in order to even withstand the attack from Aerodactyl long enough to knock it out and start getting our HP back. There's a lot that has to go right here. We have to land our Hypnosises, we have to get lucky with how long Lance's Pokemon stay asleep, and we have to do enough damage while also getting enough of our own HP back. Unfortunately, after numerous attempts at this, it's just not going our way. I can only even occasionally get to the Charizard, much less the 3 Dragonites after that. When we finally do get past the Charizard to his first Dragonite, I don't even do half damage to it before it takes us out with an Outrage. Yeah, this isn't happening yet. I ultimately decide I can't win with what I've got at this level. I decide to let Lance knock me out so that I can go back and level up and potentially re-strategize. So at this point, there's not much more I can really go do or really go get and help. The spell tag that would boost our ghost type moves can only be found on Shuppets and Bannettes in the Safari Zone, but the Safari Zone in this game requires a lot of real world hours be spent doing stupid little things that let time pass in the real world so that the Safari Zone can rearrange itself or something. The item that would boost poison type moves is obtainable too as a held item on Tentacool, as well as gifted on Fridays. None of this is really convenient. I ultimately decide to try and find an Abra, as those will, at least 5% of the time, have a Twisted Spoon which will boost Dream Eater's damage and thus its health regen by 20%. Now, this is where I really showed my rust with these. I taught my Ghastly Thief so that I could steal the held item from an Abra. What I then forgot, and didn't remember till I was looking back at this afterwards, was that the game doesn't tell you if the Pokemon is holding an item or not. See, I thought the little Pokeball under the name was that it meant it was holding an item. That actually means you've caught it already. So what Giddy Goat me did was spend over a full hour in real life that's staying in. Which I guess would be at least 4 hours of game time since I'm using a speed up on this, in the grass south of Goldenrod City looking for an Abra with that little ball. I never found one, because I never caught one. So instead of doing what I was supposed to do, which was attack every Abra with Thief looking for a spoon, I spent an hour looking for something that literally wasn't going to happen. Well, egg on my face then. Who knows how many Twisted Spoons I let go? I sure encountered a lot of Abra. I encountered a lot of Ditto too. I also think this was probably the reason I didn't bother to go try and find any Tentacool spawns after the entire hour of this sped up search yielding nothing, air quotes. I figured that too would be just an equal waste of time. I ultimately spent some time off stream grinding and leveling all the way up from 63 to 73 so that I could challenge Lance again at a higher level. I finally decided it wasn't worth the hassle to try and find these held items that I wasn't even looking for properly. But in any case, we're back at 73, and really a number of attempts all go the same as before. I could make a bit more progress than we were before though, but ultimately I take a ton of damage from Aerodactyl and its company before we get knocked out. I do manage to get to Lance's final Dragonite a couple of times, which is something that hadn't happened before. That being said, we're getting Thunder Waved along the way from his second Dragonite, which is causing problems. Missing Hypnosis, granted, doesn't help either, but what can you do? I try a number of times again before I finally get a run that seems to start to come together. Gyarados is out first, but we put it to sleep with Hypnosis before we finish it off while napping with 2 Shadow Balls. Aerodactyl is out next and chunks us hard with a Crunch before we knock it out with Hypnosis. A Dream Eater later and it's down to red health, so Lance uses a full restore. That lets us get our 2 Shadow Balls in to knock it out, and thanks to Shell Bell, we're back to full health for the Charizard. Charizard fares the same as its first non-dragon compatriots, and we put it to sleep and then dual Shadow Ball for the knockout. The first of Lance's 3 Dragonites is next, and it brings us to red with an Outrage, but I land Hypnosis to put it to sleep. I get off 2 consecutive Dream Eaters, which bring it to red while getting our health back to green. It stays asleep another turn, which lets us get off a Shadow Ball to finish it off. The next Dragonite is out, and we get a good Shadow Ball to bring it down to less than half, but we get Thunder Waved in exchange. It outspeeds us now to land a Dragon Rush, which brings us to red. Paralysis doesn't hold though, and we respond with a Shadow Ball again to knock it out. Lance's final Pokemon is his 3rd Dragonite, which comes out and misses Blizzard. I fire back a Shadow Ball through Paralysis to bring it low. Dragonite misses its 2nd consecutive Blizzard, only about a 9% chance of that occurring, and we break through Paralysis to fire off one final Shadow Ball for the knockout and beat the game. And with that, we've beaten the core of Soul Silver with just a Ghastly. I hope you enjoyed. Now, I know what y'all are thinking, surely he won't leave it there. And you're right, I won't. We still have to see if we can beat Red at the end of the game. Now, for anyone who's unfamiliar, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver have a post-game where you can travel around a condensed version of Kanto and beat all the gyms there and challenge a final post-game boss, Red. Most of Kanto is uneventful, so I won't go into great detail about most of it, but I'll highlight a couple notable moments before the final key battle that y'all want to see. I eventually find my way to Blue, the leader of the Viridian City Gym, and the final gym leader we have to battle in Kanto. He's got a nice mixed team, and he's usually worth stopping for a breakdown, so let's have it. Executor is out first and goes down with a Sludge Bomb. His Arcanine comes out next and weathers a Shadow Ball, hits us hard with a Flare Blitz. While Blue full restores it, we go for a Hypnosis and a Dream Eater to bring it down and restore our health in the process. A Sludge Bomb finishes it off and out comes Rhydon. A Shadow Ball brings that to a Sliver before it brings us to Red with a Stone Edge, and we finish it off with another Shadow Ball. Machamp is next, so we put it to sleep and hit hard with a super effective Dream Eater for the knockout and a lot of our HP back. He's got a Gyarados out next, and we hit it with Shadow Ball while it Dragon Dances, and we just Shadow Ball it again for the knockout. Last out is his Pidgeot, which goes down to a one-shot critical hit Sludge Bomb, and that's the win. So now that we've secured our 8 Kanto badges by beating Blue, it's time to fight Red at the top of Mount Silver. Sounds like a Bob Ross painting. After a little more traveling, we find our way to the top of Mount Crumpet to face off against the Grinch. It's hailing here, which sucks, as that will not only chunk our HP a little each turn, it'll also make Blizzard 100% accurate. And guess what moves he has? But for the first time in a while, we're actually out-leveled, as his Pikachu is level 88 to our 86. We go for a Shadow Ball, but we're outsped, and his Pikachu hits us with Volt Tackle for a one-hit knockout. This Pikachu has a Light Orb, which gives it a 50% boost on its attack and special attack. So not only is it faster than us, it has a major damage boost. I can't stop it either. We just lose. I opt to try and use a Quick Claw just to see if we can go first and how much damage we can get if we do. Our first attempt with it triggers, but even with our Stab Shadow Ball, it doesn't bring it down, and it just hits us back with Iron Tail for 159 damage. So even if we could knock it out, which we can't without a crit, the hail damage chunks us for the rest of our health and finishes us off. I have no choice but to level up here and try again. I dump the last of my rare candy into Ghastly and try again at level 100. That's it. We can't get any stronger health-wise, so we gotta work with what we got. We're not even doing half damage with it though, as Shadow Ball's just not doing it. He does on occasion swap from that Lapras into Snorlax, which presents another problem, as now we have to use Sludge Bomb. Unfortunately for us, his Snorlax knows Crunch, which just decimates our HP, and also for some reason the Snorlax knows Blizzard, which is still 100% accurate in the hail. It's actually starting to look like I may not be able to do this. I'm not sure that I can get any of the type enhancing items, so I decide to resort to going back through the Elite Four to try and respawn the Snorlax in Kanto. I didn't catch it before, and it's the only source of leftovers in the game, so the only way to get it back is to rebattle the Elite Four and then it'll spawn. Needless to say, this takes a number of tries. Lance was hard before and is even harder now. I easily had to redo Lance a dozen or so tries before finally beating him a second time. That does respawn the Snorlax though, so I go back to Kanto, catch it, and then pluck its leftovers off while it's in the box. I go back to Red atop the mountain one final time, and it's now or never. I can't do anything else, so we have to beat him now with what we have. At one point I tried the choice specs, which give a 50% damage boost but lock you into a single move. Ultimately, I just try to brute force it with leftovers equipped. It'll give me back about 13 HP every turn, which will essentially at least negate the hail damage and potentially keep me afloat. I tried over and over and over again to get somewhere with Lance. That's not Lance.
Lance came back.
Lance came back. Lance pushed Red off the cliff and is now who I have to beat. Took his Pokeballs and is now who I have to beat. I tried over and over and over again to get somewhere with Red, and finally, after a couple dozen resets, we get this run that started to show promise. His Pikachu coming out first went down to a single Shadow Ball, as it's done pretty much every time since I've been back. Lapras is out and we put it to sleep right away and start whittling it down with Shadow Ball. At one point Red uses a full restore, but we got a special drop, so we're able to hit it down with a couple more Shadow Balls. Next out is Blastoise, and we land a Hypnosis right away to put it to sleep, while a combination of hail damage and Shadow Balls brings it down. Our leftovers are keeping us at full strength, negating the hail damage, and out comes a Snorlax. We miss our Hypnosis and it hits us with Crunch to bring us all the way down to 18 health. I land the next Hypnosis though, and Snorlax stays asleep long enough for us to replenish our health a bit with 2 Dream Eaters and a final Sludge Bomb to bring it down. Charizard is next, and we sleep it with Hypnosis, use a Dream Eater, and then take a lot of damage from an Air Slash when it wakes back up. I hit it with a Sludge Bomb to finish it off, but now we're down to red health. Fortunately though, all we have left is the Venusaur. I put it to sleep and do big damage with a super effective Dream Eater before red uses a full restore. I put it back to sleep, use another Dream Eater to bring it low, and while we're almost back to full health, the Venusaur hits us with a Sleep Powder and we're out cold. At this point though, I realize Venusaur doesn't do much to us, as while we're out it just hits us with a negligible Giga Drain thanks to our poison typing. Red full restores it again to mitigate the hail damage, and we wake up, just start swinging away with Shadow Ball. At one point he misses with a Frenzy Plant, full restores again, and we just keep hammering away with Shadow Ball till we finally brute force knock him out and beat the game. But there you go. It is in fact possible to beat SOULSILVER with only a Gastly. And that's the run. I hope you all had fun and enjoyed. I don't know if this video means I'm back, or if it's going to wind up being an isolated one-off, but we'll see what happens. Having no free time makes doing these videos rather difficult, but I do want to get back to doing them for y'all, at least somewhat consistently. But until next time, whenever that might be, happy Halloween, and go catch 'em all.